Okay, I think we're recording. Hi, everybody. This is Jake Thomas. I'm a coach for various debate teams here in the West. I coach Mandan High School along with Bismarck High School, Legacy High School, and Century High School. Last year, I was one of the World Schools debate coaches for the Nationals team that North Dakota had at the tournament down in Dallas. So Gail asked me to do some work here with you guys on points of information, which is a part of World Schools debate. It's actually one of the cooler parts of World Schools debate. We'll talk about what they are and how you offer them and just kind of what the basic gist of it is. We are recording this, so hopefully it works and we can get it sent out to you in the future to kind of take a look at this. I hope the quality is okay. I'm in my office right now, and hopefully I think Jeff was saying it's sounding pretty good. So if we have people that join in, they can definitely ask any questions at any time, and I'll be happy to answer anything. I don't know how long this will go. We'll just kind of have a good conversation and see how it goes. But we'll get started with points of information. These are referred to as POIs. That's kind of the lingo that the debate world would use. And I got a thing on my computer I'm just going to be reading off of because it's really good information that they put out. It's kind of a guide to World Schools debate. And so when it says what are points of information, basically points of information are interjections by speakers' opponents. So if you're giving a speech, somebody's going to stand up and offer a POI. They are allowed in the middle part of speeches. For example, in an 8-minute speech with points of information, a bell is rung at 1 minute and at 7 minutes. Between the bells, points of information may be offered. Debaters offer points of information by standing in their place and saying point of information. So a debater would stand up and they have to be recognized, and we'll talk all about that, but you just stand up and say that you're point of information. The speaker may then either accept or decline the point. So if you stand up, you don't have to be recognized. They could just sit you down, or just because you stand up doesn't mean you get to speak. You have to be called on in order to speak. Very, very similar to like student congress. If you're involved in that, it's more similar to that than other parts of debate. If the speaker accepts the offerer asks a question or makes a statement relating to the speaker's argument. If the speaker declines, the offerer simply just sits down. So for those of you who have done student congress in the past, this would be like standing up in the chamber and being recognized by the chair to offer questions or offer a motion, similar to that. For those of you who have any type of debate background, if you're doing like public forum debate, this is very different from that because there's no set time to ask questions. In other parts of debate, or for Lincoln Douglas and public forum debate, you have a block of time that you can ask questions. This is not the case. If you have a question or a thought that you want to offer, you just stand up, and if you get called on, you get to speak. If not, you sit down. You don't get that structured time. What makes it really cool is that it allows for a good spontaneity of debate, and it allows for some good clash throughout the whole process. So you don't have to wait to speak up. If they say something that you disagree with or you want to ask them about, you can just stand up right away and take it from there. So it allows for a really high energy type of flow to the thing. I'm sure one thing you guys have talked about probably already in these videos is that one thing that's kind of different about World Schools debate is that there's no prep time. There's no downtime. It just starts and it's speeches all the way through until the very end. So any type of strategy building or argumentation that you're trying to work on, you're working at that as the round is going on. And this points of information is just another way in which that happens. It's just kind of in the flow of the debate and take it from there. Let me see here. When we are talking about points of information, as a rule on your team, so remember when we're doing the actual debate, you're going to have 3 speakers at a time. You can have a total of 5 people on the team, but only 3 are speaking. And as a rule of thumb, every speech, as a general rule, each speaker of a team should offer 2, 3, or 4 points of information to each speaker. So if you have 3 people on the team, they need to be offering at least 2 points of information every speech. And so if you do not stand up and offer POIs, if you're just very passive during the debate, you are not going to get a good score during the debate. Because that's one thing that's really great about World Schools is that it judges you not just on how you are, the arguments you're making, but how are you making those arguments? Are you polished speaker? Are you, statesman-like? That's kind of a big one. Are you offering points of information? Are you responding to points of information? All those kind of different things factor into your score at the end of the round and can tip the scales as far as who's winning or losing the debate. So again, as a rule, every time your opponent's speaking, you, individual debater, have to offer at least 2 to 3, I would say, points of information. And that goes for your partners as well. So if one speaker is going that first 8-minute speech, your team in general should be standing up at least 6 times to offer POIs. If you have one person that does it all 6 times, you're not going to get a good score because your other 2 people have not been involved in the debate. So it's important to spread it out that way. Many debaters who do not offer at least 2 points of information see this as a sign of not having anything to say. Usually this is far from the truth. We all have things to say. We all need to think of things that we can offer or question on. So it's really important to be really committed to that when you are during the debate. This is a big part of the thing. You can't just sit back and be passive. When should you offer these points of information? So if the speaker is speaking, let's say their first 8-minute speech, the general answer to that is just when you have something to say, stand up. Even by standing and offering a point, you are showing disagreement with the speakers, with what the speaker is saying. Even if you don't get called on, just standing up is a sign that your team has something to say, and that's going to go well for the debate. The judge is going to like that. We talked earlier about how you can't give it in the first minute or the last minute. That's called protected time. So there's no questions allowed at that time. So can't stand up until you hear the bell ring. But other than that, anytime they say something that you disagree with or you have a question about, stand up. Okay. That being said, you should never give points with the intention of being rejected. So if you know they're not going to call on you, don't stand up. That's just going to be like badgering the speaker. If you're just excessively standing up all of the time, knowing that they're not going to call on you, don't stand up. That's not good sportsmanship. But most of the time, if you have something to say or something to offer, go ahead and ask. There are a few times when you definitely should not offer points of information. You should not offer points during a speaker's setup. So if they're just getting their speech going, listen to the speaker. The speaker. You don't want to all of a sudden start asking them questions when they haven't even had a chance to say what their case is. And that's why that first minute is protected time. But even after that first minute, just let them get going a little bit. We don't want to jump the gun too often. Believe me, there will be plenty of time to offer question. 8 minutes is a long time for a constructive kind of speech. So when you want to say something or offer point of information, how do you go about doing that? Basically, the simplest way of offering points is just to stand in your place and politely reach out your hand like you're asking for a dollar bill or a high five. Just reach out your hand. Sometimes they say you should reach out and just say, I have a point of information. But it's really important to be professional. That's a big part of World Schools debate is how you handle yourself. And this is not a type of debate where you're shouting at your opponents or trying to bully people or anything like that. This is a very statesman-like debate, so you need to be acting that way in all capacities. And so it's polite just to stand up, offer your hand, and if you get called on, then you go from there. If you get rejected, most of the time what will happen is if I stand up and I have a POI and the speaker doesn't want to take my question right now, they might just wave me down. They might just say, sit down. They won't even say that. They'll just wave you down and you sit down, or they'll say, I'll take you in a second, or I'll take you in a minute, or whatever. So they'll acknowledge you either way. And it's okay. Don't be dejected if they tell you to sit down. That's okay. You've done your job. You've stood up, you tried to offer POI, and you can do it in a couple more minutes or a couple more sentences or whatever you want to do until they call on you. It's going to be bad form on them not to call on you. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But when you are doing that, when it comes to point of information, despite their name, there is no requirement for points of information to be about giving information at all. You can mention facts, statistics, the logic of your opponent's case, or anything else that is relevant. So unlike in other types of debate where you have to keep it just to questions, that's not necessarily the case with points of information, which is something I really like. So if we're listening to a team and they are offering a case and they say something that we very much disagree with, like factually wrong, or we're just with the logic isn't good, we can just stand up, and if they call on us, we can just look at the judge and say, Judge, what they're saying here is not true. The fact is blah 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 blah, and that is really something that's different from other points of debate. Um, that being said, if you can frame it as a question, I think you'd be better off doing that. For an example they give on here is, where possible, phrase your point as a question. A question demands a response from the speaker. So you want to engage the speaker. If you just get up there and rattle off a fact, the speaker can just say, okay, well, that's your opinion, or they're not supposed to, we want them to feel the pressure. So how do you feel the pressure? Put them on the spot by asking a question. A question demands a response from the speaker, and it can help to clarify your point. For example, suppose that a speaker is discussing the great benefits that the internet can bring to the developing world. One point of information might be approximately 80% of the world population has never used a telephone. So you could stand up and give that fact to the judge, and the judge knows that now. However, it's much more effective to say something like, you say that the internet is bringing significant benefits to the people of the developing world. How is this consistent with the fact that approximately 80% of the world's population has never used a telephone? So now we're forcing them to answer a question to us. And if they call on us for POI and don't answer the question effectively, we've done our job. Or if we can get them to slip up on a question, we've done our job. We've halted their progress in the speech. We've made them flustered. We've got them on the record saying something. And the big thing about the POIs is they're strategic. We want them to go on record and say something or let it be known. And we're always referencing back to that later on in our speeches. We don't want to just use it for the sake of using it. It's got to be strategic. So let's get them on the record saying something, and then let's use that to our advantage down the road in the next couple speeches or throughout the debate. One thing though, if you're asking questions during a POI, is try not to ask questions that allow the speaker to expound the virtues of their own case. So they say this mistake usually occurs if your point is too general. For example, asking, how can you prove that assertion or that point, is just giving them full range to say whatever they want, and you're really not challenging them at all. So we don't want to be too vague with our questions. We want to be very pointed and have a purpose. So purpose and pointed, keep those in mind. We also want to keep them short. This is not a time to go on a filibuster and give a 1-minute fact finding or little factoid. What we want is a point of information can be as long as 15 seconds. And then if anything longer than 15 seconds, usually the chair or the judge is going to say that you're out of order because you're kind of halting the time. So if your point is particularly subtle, save it for rebuttal. It's not the start of a conversation. You're not engaging like a soliloquy with the person. So you're not going to go back and forth. You have one shot to say this, and you better make it count. So what we're going to say is, keep them to under 15 seconds. So it's either a short question or a short statement to go on the record and then sit down. You should don't remain standing as the speaker answers. Don't engage in any further exchange with the speaker. Your point should attack your opponent's case, not defend your own case. So when we offer the POIs, it's all about what your opponent is saying. And that's something from a strategy standpoint, we just, like I said, you have to have strategy behind that. You want to have a specific intent. So you don't want to just bring up stuff from your case because you're not talking about your case right now. You're going to have plenty of time to talk about your case. We want to focus on the weaknesses of the opponent's case and point those out through the POIs. Don't offer points of clarification. Doing so is a wasted opportunity to attack. So we don't want to say, if your opponent's attacking your case and saying, well, our opponent said blah, 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 blah. You don't want to offer a POI saying, well, just to clarify, what we meant by that is blah, blah, blah. You have your own speeches to do that, and the judge can hear you when you speak on your own time. So don't waste a POI on clarifying your own case. The POIs are used to attack the opponent's case. Point out the flaws, point out the logical fallacies, point out the factual errors, those kind of different things. We got to get those on record. And that's why a lot of debaters will find it helpful. You don't want to just stand up and then not have anything to say. So have the POIs planned out as the speech is going on. Have it rehearsed in your head. How are you going to say it? You don't want to just stand up and start blurting out things. That's going to make you look bad, and it's going to be a wasted time for POI. And you think about it. If your opponent is on a roll and they're really tearing down your case, you better be standing up and offering a POI, because you need to halt their momentum. You need to stop them in their tracks before they get on too much of a roll. And we've got to point out where their excuse me, where their weaknesses are. And so, but that has to be done well. And if it's not done well, it's not going to be effective. And anytime we speak up in a debate, we want to be effective. It has to have a purpose. Um, and always, like I said earlier, be willing to refer back to a point of information. So, for example, in your rebuttal, you might find it effective to say something like, now, I asked the first speaker about this on a point of information, and she said, blah, 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 blah. However, even this doesn't really explain things. So you can use what they say in response to your POIs, use that against them. Always be referring back to that. And again, that just goes back to, we have to have some type of purpose here. Use your points of information to identify problems with your opponent's case, not reasons that your opponents might lose. For example, if your opposition has forgotten to rebuke the main argument of your case, leave it away. Don't stand up and say, hey, by the way, they didn't say anything about that point. Again, that is not the purpose of POI. POI is to engage or to point out what your opponent's case is doing wrong, not what their debate style is doing wrong. And that's kind of a good distinction. So let's say you're on the other side. Let's say you are the speaker and somebody stands up and they want to offer a POI. How many do you have to take? Well, we don't want to take all of them, right? Because then you're just wasting your own time, because the clock doesn't stop just because you're taking a POI. That's all part of that 8-minute speech. So the rule is you have to take at least 2 per speech. Okay, I wouldn't take more than 2. You can't take less than 2. So just take 2. If you want to do the first 2 people that stand up, that could be a strategy you use. I would say if you're on a roll and you are going to town and you are in the zone, by all means do not take a POI, because you don't want to halt your own momentum. And that's the one thing that's nice. You are in control of when you take those POIs. So don't let them halt your momentum that way. However, make sure you don't run out of time, because once you get to the 7-minute mark and you only have 1 minute left, you can't take any more POIs. That's protected time. So make sure you're doing it strategically, but know kind of where your case is going to be going. What are the strong parts of your case? What are the really emotional or passionate parts of your case? Don't take POIs during that. You don't want to break that up. The most important principle in accepting and dealing with points of information is that you, the speaker, are in control. Your opposition is trying to interject in your speech, so they will do it on your terms. You get to decide that. Merely because your opponent is aggressive or frustrated does not mean that you have any greater responsibility to accept a point of information. You should accept a POI if and when it suits you. As a general rule, you should aim to accept points of information when you are established, clear in what you are saying. For example, the middle or end of an argument is often an excellent time to accept a point, not at the very beginning. Similarly, you should not accept points of information during rebuttal. Rebuttal should be about attacking your opposition's case. Accepting POIs can make your rebuttal seem confusing and defensive. Finally, on the small chance that you might be making a weak argument, don't accept a point. Hopefully, you should never find yourself in this position, but if you do, you will only compound your problems by giving your opponents a say. So if you are struggling with things to say, you're just going to have to BS your way through it, because don't call in a POI, because that allows them to point out all of the things that are wrong in your case. So don't use it as a time filler, basically. If you don't want to accept the POI, like I said, there's numerous ways you can do it. You can just say, no, thank you, I'm not going to take any POIs. You don't need to be rude or a jerk about it. You don't say, no, we're not going to do that. Just say, no, thank you, not at this time. Or you can just wave them down and they'll sit down. When we were at the national tournament, that was what we were told to do. Just wave them off and they'll sit down. You can just do it politely. And that way that doesn't break up your speech either. You can still be reading your speech and waving people off, and they won't have to worry about, that way you're not breaking things up. Let's see here. So if you've decided to accept the point of information that you've just been offered, what should you do next? You should first finish your sentence. So don't let them, it doesn't have to be an abrupt thing. If they stand up and they say you have a point of information, finish your sentence and then say, I hear dissent. That's one that we see in a lot of videos. If you watch some World Schools debates, you'll hear that. They'll finish their sentence, they'll call on the person that stood up to offer POI, and they'll say, I see there's dissension, or here there's dissent. And then the person goes on their POI. The great thing about the POI, though, is once they start speaking, if you want to shut them down and have them stop speaking, that's your time. You just say, okay, thank you, and then they'll sit down, or you just wave them off. So don't let them speak for 20, 30 seconds. If they're saying something that potentially is really damaging to your case, you're going to want to shut them down and say they got to stop speaking. Or if they're rattling on and on and on, it's eating into your time, then you need to be assertive and just say, okay, thank you, or just wave them down. Again, you're in control of the time. Or you can just, if somebody stands up and you just can say yes, what is your question, something like that. But for the most part, just looking at them and saying, I hear there's dissent, or I see there's a POI, or something like that. When it comes to, I'm just looking at here, one thing is what we get this a lot in any type of debate is, what if you get asked a question you don't know the answer to, or you don't know how to effectively answer it? For that one, they have a good tip for you here, and it says, finally, you will occasionally receive points that you simply can't answer. Usually this is because the point relates to a very specific example beyond your general knowledge of the topic. For example, this is an example they use in this article. An opponent may ask, how does this relate to the Dobhal Power Corporation and its activities in the Indian state of whatever, or some country that you have no idea what it is? Obviously, the best response is to explain exactly how your point relates to it. But if you don't know, the best response is to put it back on your opponents by saying something like, I don't see how the Power Corporation has any direct relevance. If your opposition would like to explain what elements of that example are so important for us, we'll be happy to answer them later. So if you don't know, don't spend a lot of time on the POI trying to figure it out. If you don't know, just say, we don't see that there is any connection, but we'd be happy to hear what you're saying about it and answer you later. And then move on. It's back to you. You're back in control. I'm trying to think of other things that I can say about POIs or something that we've witnessed. I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is that you have to be engaged in the process. It's a very interactive style of debate. You can't have 3 people up there and only one person doing all the legwork. If you do that, you're not going to win. Okay, so everybody has to be engaged in that process. You have to be offering questions or statements. That's one thing I really like about World Schools debate is when you offer those POIs, they don't have to be questions. You can talk right to the judge on that. If they call on you, you can say, Judge, listen, they just said that, premiums under Obamacare went up by 250%. That is blatantly false. It went up this much, or they're going down, or something like. Don't let them get away with that in this round. We want to go on record and say this is what's true, or whatever the point is going to be. So that's what's really cool about that. In other types of debate, you don't get that opportunity until it's your time to speak. Here, you can interrupt the speaker, interject yourself into the debate, which is really nice. On a general note, and this goes really nicely into the points of information, is that I cannot stress enough how the professionalism really factors into the World Schools style. Anybody that gets up there and tries to talk a million miles a minute is using a lot of very structured speaking that they can read really fast, like outline style, is not going to be effective in this style of debate. We run into that in other types of debate, and anybody that tries to do that here is not going to be successful. This is a really great mix of speech and debate. Because if you have a great case, but you're not offering it in a persuasive manner, in a way that is very statesmanlike, with some passion, you're not gonna do well. You're not gonna score well. So at the national tournament, that's what was really nice about our team, North Dakota. We had speech kids, we had student congress kids, and we had debate kids, and it really was a nice mix. We had kids offering really passionate speeches, and our debaters were more of the structured kind of rebuttal type of stuff. So it's a really good mix. So if you're forming teams, you want a good mix of everybody. because that first speaker, their first 8 minutes, that's all they do is offer that speech. So you need somebody that can deliver a speech really, really well. And if they can do their job, that's all they need to do for that round, because they don't speak again until the very end. Or anybody can speak for the last speech, but so I would just recommend finding somebody that's a really good presenter. If you have an intern person or a really good speech persuader informed person that maybe isn't that interested in debate, this is a great way for them to get involved, because they get to deliver your first 8 minutes, and that's got to be a lot of good passion and stuff like that, which is really great. You don't see that in other types of debate, which is really nice. I guess at this point, Jeff, I think you're the only one on here right now, but is there any questions you had about kind of learning about POIs for the first time?
Not really so much. I mean,
Does it
it
make
seems,
sense what I'm saying?
yeah, it makes sense pretty much what you're saying and how, they get tossed in there and what their purpose is and why you want to use them.
Mm-hmm. I just think the biggest thing for kids to remember is that they don't have to be questions, but we want to try to keep them in questions, because that's going to engage the opposition. But if they're saying something that's blatantly false and you have that information, I would just stand up and say, listen, this is 100% not true. This is the evidence. But if it's something we're challenging them on, I would try to keep it and phrase it as a question, because that's going to put the heat on the opponent.
Yeah.
And then it just, everybody has to be doing it at least 2 times a speech. But when you are receiving the POIs, you don't take more than 2. Just take 2. So they'll be standing up a lot, and you can just wave them off. But take 2 when it suits you. You're in control of your time. I think those are the biggest takeaways from that. And it's not a bad idea, and I'd say this with my regular debate kids too, have some of these planned out beforehand. You're going to know what some of the prepared topics are, and so have some of those questions written out beforehand. Maybe you have some great things in your case, and you're thinking, man, if we can just get our opponents to acknowledge this, or if we can trap our opponents with this question, that's great. That's the kind of stuff you want to do. We do that with our debate kids all the time. We need to get them on record saying something about this, then we're going to do it and then use their words against them. Basically, that's what all you're doing with the POI, or to offer some type of major rebuttal. But yeah, I think that's a good idea to have some stuff kind of pre-written out, but then you also want to have stuff that is relevant to what the debate is saying. So we don't want to just ask questions that have nothing to do with what their case is. But I think there is an opportunity to have some stuff kind of planned out, or at least a strategy planned out. Yeah, is there anything else?
I can't really think of too much. This is still, once I see this first meet here that we're going to go to, it'll be a lot clearer and I'll kind of know a little more.
Definitely YouTube World Schools Debate too, because there's some really good examples. And I did that when I first found out I was coaching at Nationals for this. And after I watched the first thing on YouTube, I was so excited. It was such a cool style of debate. And so I highly encourage anybody that watches this video, definitely go on YouTube and check it out, because you'll see how fun and interactive it is. And I actually think it's less intimidating than other styles of debate, because it's just continuous kind of speaking. You get to work with your partners, and the topics are really fun. We've got some good topics for you guys for next weekend in Mandan. And I know they've probably already talked about how we have prepared topics and impromptu topics, and that really makes it fun. And surprisingly, our team at Nationals did better on the impromptu topics than they did on the prepared ones. So it'll be pretty cool, and it's nothing to be too nervous about. Our first tournament in Mandan is always a good one, because we have a lot of new kids that are just trying this for the first time, and we have a judging pool that is very acknowledging of that and helps kids out, and it's just going to be a fun atmosphere. And hopefully this is an activity that people like, and we can get it going and maybe have it as a regular activity for the debate season. So if you think of any other questions, you can always email me. My email is jakedthomas@gmail.com. So it's JAKE, the letter D as in dog, and then Thomas, THOMAS, @gmail.com. And I'd be happy to email you anything back, or if you want to Zoom about it, just let me know on that. We can get something set up and take it from there.
All right.
All right. Sounds good. Have a good night.
All right. You too.
Okay. See ya.
Thanks.